Competition. Y'all know it. It's the reason we look like this instead of looking like Homo habilis. We've all competed before, whether that be in Little League, game of tag, game of chess, blood sport. As someone who's played a lot of games, and as someone who's done their fair bit of competing, to varying degrees of success, I noticed a lot of similarities and differences between casual and competitive games. It's the same medium, but there's a reason why I'm more invested in EVO this weekend instead of my rotting Spiritfarer save. I wanted to talk about how games facilitate competition, how these games can build long-lasting communities, and how a game's competitive scene can change the identity of a game as a whole. Risk of Rain 2 is a wonderful game, and is probably my favorite roguelike. Each character is completely unique and fun, the art style and the environments are beautiful, there are so many cool item builds that you can make, and, at least for me, it's a really meaty challenge, truly a 10 out of 10 game.
Where this game really shines though, as well as every other roguelike, is its emphasized learning curve.
AKA dying a lot. You learn a lot through dying in games. I've yet to see if this works out in real life, but we'll see. Each death in a roguelike steadily builds progress towards beating the game as a whole. Each time you die, upgrades open up, more story becomes available, and your skill as a player improves. Which means this run is the run, god damn it. You're supposed to die in a roguelike, obviously. You beat Hades on your first run, what are you? You're a freak. The game's systems make it so that you're constantly rewarded for dying, both literally with stat boosts and upgrades, and mentally with your improving player skill. If you have a frontal lobe, you know this isn't exclusive to roguelikes or anything. I just wanted to highlight how the devs behind roguelikes understand that this learning process is satisfying, and how the genre hinges on maximizing that enjoyment as much as possible. Okay, let's list the reasons why I think this game is good. You have a lot of player expression, it provides a steep challenge, and it has an emphasized cycle of improvement and dopamine, and it keeps going and going and going and going. The best roguelikes often all push these to the maximum. I'm talking Hades, Risk of Rain 2. When I was looking up stuff for this video, apparently Mystery Dungeon's a roguelike. Now, let's compare this single player game to a more competitive game.
Street Fighter 6. I've been playing a lot of Street Fighter 6 recently, and it's been a blast.
I like the neutral. I like the combos. Meter management is somehow fun, and I get to play as a wide cast of characters. Like Risk of Rain, it has a lot of player expression through each character. Ryu is different from Ken, which is different from Guile, which is different from Chun-Li, which is different to Manon. Oh my god! Also like Risk of Rain 2, you will lose a lot. But that's where a lot of the fun from fighting games comes from. Slowly developing skills and eventually mastering them. This is all to say that I enjoy Risk of Rain 2 and Street Fighter 6 largely for the same reasons. Player expression, a steep challenge, and getting better as a player is really satisfying. So why do I feel the urge to play Street Fighter 6 more than Risk of Rain? Well, looking at the second thing I mentioned, the steep challenge that each game provides, we can see that the graphs are a bit different. See, where the Risk of Rain graph ends right around here, the Street Fighter 6 graph ends right about here. This is the difference between Risk of Rain 2 and Street Fighter 6, among other things. The devs behind Risk of Rain 2 can easily manipulate the player's experience of dealing with its challenges because they control how difficult the game can be. Capcom can make Street Fighter 6 the most accessible and easy to learn fighting game ever made, but they can't control how good your next challenge is going to be. They're going to be another being of flesh and bones with their own independent thought process and habits and patterns. Mario can stomp on the 1-1 Goomba real easy, but make that Goomba another player and suddenly Mario's job gets a lot harder. The Goomba can fade back and punish the recovery of Mario's jumping. The Goomba can bait Mario into undershooting his jump and punishing his recovery. Or the Goomba could just keep walking forward and not give a fuck. What differentiates a casual game from a competitive one is the infinite challenge provided by other players, and the systems that these games have to use to help the player overcome said challenge. Riot said fuck that and gave us little colored badges and fuck all. Of course, competitive games have been slowly improving and making matches more bearable to play. Lots of little things that you don't really notice anymore. Pinging a location in a first-person shooter. Input buffers in fighting games to make it easier to throw out moves. General improvements to visual clarity and UI to make everything more readable. But what I'm going to be talking about are the larger systems that have been added to competitive games and have changed the way that competitive games are experienced. Hence, the little colored badges and fuck all. To offset differences in players' skill, competitive games often include a ranked ladder and include skill-based matchmaking. This helps the player improve gradually over a period of time instead of getting thrown into a match with a bunch of high-ranked people that'll just stomp them into the ground. This is, of course, good. I like skill-based matchmaking. I'm not trying to learn Valorant against Radiants and Immortals. I want to have a chance of winning. I like the challenge of playing against people of similar skill levels instead of getting rolled. I can steadily improve my skills and have an easier time learning, rather than throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. My mouse. I'm throwing my mouse against the wall and seeing if it sticks. Skill-based matchmaking is great. No complaints. I don't like rank mode. Ranks are, in concept, cool. They provide a tangible thing that can quantify your skill level, and it feels good to move up in the ranks and have something that signifies your growth. What I don't like is how they make you feel like garbage when you lose. Remember how I talked about the cycle of losing and improving then winning, and how it's something that provides enjoyment to the player and helps them steadily grow? Yeah, so we're gonna put a number and a color next to your skill level, and you're just gonna feel like garbage whenever it goes down. Okay, cool, bye. I feel like putting a value on your skill makes you feel worse when you lose, despite it being a part of the learning process, and it makes you hyper-focus on your rank rather than actually improving. You could lose 5 matches in a row, D rank, wife and kids leave you, it's terrible, and you feel like garbage. Even though, in the micro of the match, you did things that were correct.
One enemy remaining.
You throw the whole thing away and say, I was playing terrible, I need to overhaul everything that I'm doing. That's not good. You should be looking at the micro of your game and realizing what you did right and what you did wrong. That's how you should be improving. It can also cause you to care more about your rank rather than how much you actually enjoy the game. I don't want to play another Valorant game, but I'm like 1 RR away from Platinum, so I'll just queue another.
I hate this. I don't want to play. I want to leave. Let me out. Let me out. Let me out. God, save me. Save me.
Brayden, you're emo.
So to sum it up, skill-based matchmaking good, ranks bad, and gets in the way of improvement by making you focus on your number rather than your actual gameplay. Off the top of my head, some exceptions to this are the leaderboard in Neon White, because you can only move up and see your improvement. Street Fighter 6 will also give you more points based on win streaks, and will never decrease your points based on loss streaks, basically rewarding you for winning a lot and helping you not focus on your losses too much.
Rivals of Aether only rewards your wins for the first couple of ranks, then starts punishing you for your losses when you hit gold. This is done so that newer players aren't just dying in the lower ranks, which I thought was smart.
What I am a really big fan of, though, are the pseudo-professional ranked modes that some games have. I'm mainly talking about Premier Valorant and some tournament modes in fighting games like Street Fighter 4 apparently. These modes emphasize your improvement by providing actual stakes that aren't just your rank. What matters in a tournament isn't your rank or your number, but the mistakes and the correct decisions that you make as a player or as a team. When you lose in a tournament match in Premier, for example, you're not upset about your RR going down, you're upset about the mistakes that you made in your own aim, or your macro, or anything like that, and it pushes you to improve those parts of your game. I love these types of modes and how they push you towards actual growth, and I wish there was a ranked mode that functioned more like this. Now let's talk about training modes. Practice makes perfect, of course, and competitive games also usually include a training mode or a practice area of some kind. A practice range in FPS games, the training box in fighting games, time trials in racing games. Never underestimate what a good training mode offers to the player. Dragon Ball FighterZ launched with a bare bones training mode, and because of this, things like frame data, frame advantage, etc. weren't readily available to the player.
You'd have to go online to community spreadsheets to find this sort of stuff, and because of the inaccessibility, certain setups went undiscovered until the training mode was improved. There were universal setups for fuzzy guard breaks that weren't discovered until the training mode got better.
Good training modes allow players to understand the game better and discover new techniques that can alter how people play. In Smash Melee, people learn how to SDI out of Fox up air to avoid kill confirms. Or in Melee, how Donkey Kong mains learn that you can perfect shield Falco's laser by using the back part of DK's shield. Or in Melee, how Donkey Kong mains have learned to utilize DK's giant punch to turn him around in the air, allowing them to access moves like back air off of ledge or as an approaching option. Melee Donkey Kong is just a great example of how labbing helps players understand characters and the game better. Thanks to fan-made training tools that include things like save states and hitbox visualization, the way that people have played Donkey Kong has changed drastically, and he has seen a meteoric rise in success.
Okay, quick editor's note, Junebug just got 3rd at Supernova, which is the best that DK's ever done in a fucking major. Got third place with Donkey Kong. They got third place with Donkey Kong. What the fuck?
Check out these videos right here to learn more about DK, and check out the DK Cookbook by Da. It's a really fun read. I'm using their clips to showcase Donkey Kong tech and Donkey Kong gameplay. They're a great player. Thank you for letting me use your stuff. Modern games usually come with in-depth training modes that provide players, new and old, with all the information that you need to improve your play.
Street Fighter 6 has very accessible frame data, save states, and has this cool feature that lets you play against your opponent's character in the training mode whenever you finish a match online. Just in case you want to practice against a certain move or whatever, it's great. It's all great.
Something else of note is the use of a whole single-player mode as a sort of training mode. Street Fighter 6 World Tour is just this. It's a single-player campaign designed to teach you things like motion inputs, defensive mechanics, and the ins and outs of each character's moves with your avatar character. My friend Faye had a much easier time learning Street Fighter because of World Tour.
It does a good job of teaching newer players how to play Street Fighter while also being so goofy that they don't even notice that they're learning.
Guilty Gear Strive's training mode could strive to do better. It lacks frame data, but to make up for it, it has a plethora of tutorials that helps new players understand its systems. Look at all this shit. Strive was my first fighting game, and while I got it because of the visuals and the netcode, and Testament what helped me stick around were the tutorials, helping me learn how to play fighting games. Strive has a lot of systems going on, like roaming canceling, risk, wall breaks, and has a lot of unique characters with their own meters and resources to manage, which should make the game harder to understand. But the learning resources the game has help me learn these systems and get a better grasp of the game overall. To be fair, I got the game at launch, and nowadays I think a newer player would have a harder time getting into the game just because of all the new characters. Like, it's probably just me, but how the fuck does Asuka work? Like, what is all this? Yeah. But at launch, these resources really helped me out and kept me in the game longer.
What's the point of good training modes?
Well, it's all to make the challenge of tackling incredibly high skill ceilings more bearable and more enjoyable for the player. But what if a game came out in the modern era that didn't have all these tools? A game whose systems actively dissuaded competition and made practicing a nightmare? Smash is a game that has a lot of variance in its gameplay. One of the causes of this variance being directional influence, or DI. You can use DI to change the direction of your knockback after getting hit by a move. This allows you to survive longer by DIing up towards the corner of the screen. It allows you to move yourself into a more favorable defensive position, like on a platform. I love DI. I think it's a great system that lets you interact defensively even when you're in disadvantage and makes you use your brain if you want to have a good punish game. Why doesn't the training mode allow me to practice against DI? When the game was still getting trailers, one of the things showcased were these nice lines that came out of the character when you hit them. And it would have been amazing if they measured different knockback based on DI, but instead it measures the knockback the move would have done at different percentages, which is less than useless. You cannot set DI values for your training dummy, it has no DI at all. Another thing that this training mode doesn't have is input recording or save states. You can't set a save state to practice a specific combo string or to practice defense against a burst movement option, none of that. Why do you mention this in a Street Fighter 6 video, which talked about Smash for some reason, whatever, good video. But to train against Steve's blocks, you have to build the blocks yourself on a second controller and then switch your hands to the other controller and then maybe get 5 seconds of practice until you have to do it all again, which is more than cumbersome. There is no frame data, no hitbox visualization. Hell, the combo counter doesn't even work. Ultimate's gameplay has a lot of variance with how many characters there are, but has one of the worst training modes to actually train against all these characters. If you want to have a good training mode, you have to mod your game. And ever since this training mod came out, it feels like the rate of tech being discovered has increased exponentially. Thankfully, with these tools, you can have a good training experience.
Modders built a good training mode in a cave with a box of scraps.
But Smash Ultimate's default training mode is nothing short of a disappointment. You can't get worse than it, really. When I asked Waidu if I could use his clips in my video, he said, "Don't forget to shame multiverses." And my personal feelings about multiverses aside, I do want to give an honest review of Multiverse's training mode. It's bad. On its second launch, yeah, the game released twice, that's amazing. Multiverses set a bar so low that it's through the ground and into the mantle of the earth. You can't set precise percentages. They only increase in increments of 5. You can't reset the training mode without a loading screen. It's what? And I think the worst of it all, though, is that you couldn't practice with or against characters you haven't unlocked. It takes in-game currency to unlock characters, by the way. In-game currency that is slow as shit to obtain and coincidentally can be bought with real money. I half understand why you can't train as characters that you don't have because something you experience the character without paying the extra money that we're milking you of, but not being able to have the privilege of training against a character that you don't have, not even playing, training against a character because you haven't paid for them, even though you will be playing against these characters online, terrible, just terrible. But luckily through patches, the training mode has improved a bit. You can select any character to play as or against, regardless if you own them. You can actually set bots to more behaviors in Smash, which I like. But the percentage thing, resetting requiring a loading screen, and the lack of things that I would have liked like DI toggles, save states, hitbox visualization, and frame data are all absent, and it blows. If you allow me to ramble a bit more about training modes. Stepping away from fighting games, what about FPS games? Every FPS nowadays has a practice range, which is good. It allows you to try out different characters and to practice your aim against dummies.
But I feel like practice ranges have stagnated and are lacking new ideas for training tools.
Why can't I place dummies in a custom match that allow me to test out character abilities like recon darts or flashes? How come I can't train against these dummies that like shoot back at you on a map that is in the map rotation? And I know it's a long shot, but why can't I practice against specific angles or abilities without another player? And I get that, at least for Valorant, a lot of these tools are in aim labs, and that aim labs is advertised as like this one-stop shop for practice. But I'm hoping that like the next big FPS that catches my eye allows me to customize my practice experience more.
TLDR, a good training mode allows players to get better at competing in an environment that facilitates learning, while a bad training mode can prevent advancement in a game's competitive scene.
Okay, training mode circle jerk aside, let's talk about community. Competing invites community. It invites collaboration, it invites rivalries, the works. The FGC and speedrunning communities are what they are today because of everyone's desire to compete, to get better, and to win. These communities work hard and cooperate to get better at whatever game they play, leading to the discovery of techniques, refinement of gameplay, and overall just increasing the skill ceiling of the game that they play. Off the top of my head, the best example I can think of is Melee. We all love Melee. If Melee was a woman, I'd pay for the first date and let her peg me. Melee's competitive scene has grown so much over the 20 plus years that it's been around. Watching a Mewtwo King set in 2014 and comparing it to Zane in the current year, you really see how much the game has changed.
Discoveries like slide-offs, utilizing crouch canceling more, optimal use of SDI, all of this was discovered by individuals contributing to their community.
I mentioned Donkey Kong and his meteoric rise of success, but Yoshi is another great example of a recent character boom.
Yoshi was considered a low-tier character at the start of the game's life, but discoveries made by the community, like his parry mechanic and optimal use of his double jump cancels, changed the character into a menace, and changed the landscape of the game as a whole.
This game was meant to be just a funny little party game, but the skill ceiling has shot through the roof thanks to the collaboration and work of the competitive community. Speedruns are another good example of this. Tutorials on tutorials on tutorials created to help facilitate the learning curve of speedrunning.
If you watched any Summoning Salt video, you know that communities will go to great lengths to shave down their times, either by honing their inputs or discovering new tech, like barrier skip in Wind Waker, Mario Kart Wii's ultra shortcuts, or backwards long jumping in Mario 64. Celeste's speed being uncapped sometimes makes the challenge of the speedrun literally going as fast as possible.
The Super Mario speedrun has become so competitive that the current world record is 22 frames off from the task. 22 frames! The modders of these communities can help facilitate their competitive scenes as well. I spoke earlier about Smash Ultimate and how modders created an actual training mode for the game, but Melee's modding community is insane. They have developed so many tools to teach newcomers tech like Uncle Punch and 20xx training mode. Hell, Fizzy developed rollback netcode for the game to help the scene during the pandemic and to make online practice more consistent. These sorts of things make the skill ceiling go way up. Arcade fighting games can be played with rollback and matchmaking thanks to Fightcade, and some fans have even created training modes for these games as well. Competitive communities will do their best to lift each other up and increase the skill ceiling as far as it can go. They will create new tools to make their games more accessible, and will discover more about the games they play than was thought possible. There's really nothing like the feeling that you get while competing. Something about it that makes you want to keep on going despite anything that gets in your way. The desire to win, the desire to get better, all of it just fuels you and makes you go despite any setbacks. But I can't lie when I say that sometimes I can't stand competition. There have been many times where I just don't feel it in me anymore, and my mindset changes from seeing competition as this very unifying force that pushes people to become their best, to a chore that wastes my time and makes my life worse. Why rip my hair out over a game when you could just play another game that can provide you with just as much enjoyment without the stress? The way I like to view competition is like you're trying to reach the top of a very tall mountain. I know, very original. There are smaller challenges along the climb, loose rocks, tough areas to grip, maybe your hands just get sweaty, but in the end, it's all leading up to the ultimate goal of reaching the top. But, you know, sometimes you just get to a spot. Some spot that gives you a lot of trouble and you don't know what to do, so you take some time to reflect. I think it's at this point right here that defines your relationship with competition. You could let yourself rest, then keep climbing, or stagger on with whatever stamina you have left. The latter is what I and many others have experienced before, when the push for the top becomes Sisyphusian, and it feels like you don't have it in you anymore. When I was competing in Smash last year during the winter, my results got so shit. Like, how am I losing the fucking ping pong master? I felt like crap. I felt like I was just putting time into something that wasn't making me happy anymore. Rage queuing, controller slams, straggling along to try and stay competitive even when your heart isn't in it. It can suck the life out of the hobbies that you enjoy. Sometimes you reach a point where you just need to recharge. I started commentating when my results dipped, and are still dipping, and it was something that kept me in the game while regaining my competitive spirit. Competition builds community. There are others on the mountain that you can meet and connect and learn with, making your journey a group effort. I'm not saying that you should just stop competing whenever the going gets tough. I'm just saying know your limits. Don't push yourself too far if you can't handle it. Competing is a skill. You slowly improve at it like everything else, and you learn over time the best way that you improve. Of course, if you don't like competing, this doesn't apply to you, and probably this whole video doesn't apply to you. If competing doesn't interest you, good news, there are games that don't provide literal infinite challenges and are still appealing. And if competing does interest you, and you resonated with my preachy monologue about taking a break once in a while, you could just play a casual game. I enjoy Risk of Rain 2 and Street Fighter 6 for the same reasons, but I'll boot them up for different reasons. Sometimes I'm just not mentally there enough to give a damn about my rank or trying to grind in Street Fighter, and sometimes I just want to see my funny numbers go up. Sometimes I want a meaty challenge, but don't want to engage with another player. Sometimes I just want to play something for the story and lose myself in some damn-ass world building. Competing is great and all, but it's important to remember that there are other ways to get gratification out of your hobbies. Final thing I want to note are the games that try to bridge the gap between casual and competitive experiences. These games take systems from both casual and competitive games to create some new stuff that I really like. Friends vs. Friends is a PvP shooter where you build decks of cards that provide buffs and nerfs to you during your opponent in a match. You use these cards in a match to sway the tide of a fight and create weird scenarios. You gain these cards from card packs after every couple of matches, which I feel takes some notes from roguelikes, always rewarding the player for playing, win or lose. This game has 1v1, 2v2, and 3v3 modes, with 2v2 being the main mode. The overall vibe of this game is goofy and playfully competitive. Like a game of Sorry or Uno, it's something that I want to have fun with while also being a little competitive. I think it's great. Neon White is a single-player game about speedrunning. You can compete via online leaderboards with your friends and against people globally. I mentioned it already, but I love the fact that the game only rewards you for your improvement and doesn't harp on your failures, letting you focus and improve on your times. When you're in the zone in Neon White, it feels like nothing else, and I really love that. Pokemon is an indie creature collector about battling and yada yada, you know, you Pokemon. I didn't know this, but ranked battling has existed since like Gen 5. You had ELO systems since Gen 5. In Gen 8 and 9, you have ranked battles with rotating rule sets. Unofficially, you have Smogon tiering for singles, which is basically like the main format for competitive singles. Fans have created battle simulators like Pokemon Showdown that allow you to just battle without making you find a 0 speed IV Slowbro or something dumb like that. Pokemon has a lot of intricacies in its EV system, allowing the same Pokemon to differ in strength, defense, or speed, giving a single Pokemon multiple different playstyles. It's cool to have a system that can make every Pokemon unique. It provides a lot to both casual fans and competitive fans. But with every step in the right direction, they take 4 steps back because it is so difficult to get meta-relevant Pokemon, and it's so difficult to EV your Pokemon correctly. I feel like the Pokemon Company is doing a lot to emphasize their competitive scene more, while also shooting themselves in the foot. I love competing. I always have, I always will. And many of the communities that I've joined over the years are there thanks to that shared love of competing. It's great to see so many games facilitate competition and make it easier and more accessible for newer players. It's amazing to see how communities can just grow out of love for their game. If you compete, I encourage you to think about why you do it. Is it to get better at something you enjoy? Is it because the people around you that you've met are super cool? Or is it because you like working towards something larger? I spent some time reflecting on the role I want competing to play in my life and how I've let it shape my life already, and I can confidently say that I still want to compete. I've met great people through it all, I love the grind, and I want to see how far it can go.